So today I'm going to talk about how the skin tone affects the fluence in the skin and how that might affect the clinical outcomes for laser hair or IPL hair removal or any laser treatment in the skin. Many people talk about the skin tone in terms of the Fitzpatrick. Now, this is a mistake because the Fitzpatrick scale is actually based on the way the skin responds to ultraviolet light. It's not to do with the skin colour, and yet most people seem to think this. The actual skin colour or the skin tone is all to do with the concentration of melanin mostly within the epidermis. So Steve Jacques came up with this scale a few years ago. Skin tone 1 represents a concentration up to 10% in the skin, skin tone 2, 10 to 16%, and so on. And skin tone 6, which is the darkest skin colour, is anything above about 43% in the concentration of melanin. And this makes much more sense than the Fitzpatrick scale, because this is really to do with the actual colour and not how the skin reacts to ultraviolet light. So essentially the epidermal melanin is a barrier for any light-based treatments in the skin, because some of that energy that you apply at the skin surface will interact with the melanin in the epidermis, and some of it will be absorbed at that point, and that will lead to a temperature rise in the epidermis where we don't necessarily want it. So if we have a look at the skin like this little cross section, you've got the epidermis at the top and the dermis, and I put a 5% skin tone in there, so it's a very pale coloured skin. And let's say we fire 100 joules of light energy into the skin, then we can see that the epidermis, the melanin there, will absorb or steal about 5 joules in this scenario. So only 95 joules will actually reach the dermis. So we need to view the epidermal melanin essentially as a barrier. It is going to absorb or steal some energy depending on the concentration. And that means there's less energy available to reach down into the dermis, where most of our targets tend to be hair follicles, blood vessels, etc., or even tattoo ink. Let's say now we have a darker skin. It's now a 15% concentration of melanin. We're firing in the same energy. Now that higher concentration of melanin steals more of this energy, up to 15 joules, leaving only 85 joules in the dermis. And then a darker skin tone again, 35%, so now we're getting quite dark colour here. And once again, it's stealing 35 joules, and only 65 joules will reach the dermis. So that means that darker skin tones will take away some of the energy, and less of that energy will actually reach the dermis, thereby reducing the chances of a good clinical outcome. So darker skin tones present a problem. So what this means is that darker skin tones should really be treated with higher fluences to compensate for the absorption losses in the epidermis, which is a bit counterintuitive and certainly not what people are generally taught. That means there'll be more absorption in the epidermis since we're firing higher fluences at the skin, which will lead to more potential damage, which is clearly not what we're after. So what is the answer? Well, it comes down to skin cooling. If we apply some form of cooling at the skin surface before and after Laser-IPL treatments, then we can mitigate a lot of the damage and certainly the pain caused by the temperature rise in the epidermis. If you're using ice packs, which is my preference, then you need to use them from the freezer so that they are solid, and they are absolutely frozen solid. We don't want warm, essentially ice packs, gel packs, because they won't cool for a sufficiently long period. If you have an ice pack from a freezer, they will stay frozen for quite some time when you apply them to the skin. I recommend a minimum of 2 minutes on the skin surface before you apply any laser IPL energy. And that's because my calculations have shown that a 2-minute application will cool down a significant portion of the upper skin, certainly all of the epidermis and a big chunk of the dermis, cools it right down to very low temperatures, which then means that you get less chance of pain and blistering and unwanted thermal damage. And then once you've done the treatments, you reapply the ice packs immediately afterwards to remove any excess heat energy. And there's always going to be excess heat energy floating about in the dermis looking to cook something. So you want to get that energy out as quickly as possible. The longer you leave it in the skin, the more chance there is of some sort of thermal damage in there. And we should do this on all skin tones, and that is regardless of the technology we're using. It doesn't matter if you're using contact devices like IPLs and diodes, or non-contact like YAG lasers and Alexandrites, etc. It makes no difference how you heat up the skin. It doesn't matter which technology you're using, because the skin will still be heated, so we need to make sure that we can cool the skin properly. Some devices nowadays, some of the contact devices, have built-in cooling, but these are not so efficient. Certainly after a few shots, maybe a couple dozen shots, the cooling systems within these devices is not particularly useful, because everything will have warmed up. So you're better off using an external cooling system. Ice packs, air coolers, or cryogens. They will always be better than the internal cooling system after a few shots. So we need to apply the skin cooling according to the skin tone. And it's quite simple, really. The darker the skin tone, the longer the cooling we want to apply. Basically, the darker skins will generate higher temperatures because they absorb more of the incoming energy, and therefore we need to mitigate against that by using longer times for the darker tones. So for very pale skin, 5-10%, something like that, I would recommend a minimum 2 minutes prior cooling to treatments using ice packs. But once you get up to the darkest skin tones, then you may need to apply the ice packs for 4 to 5 minutes before starting the treatment. And this is where ice packs come in particularly useful, because the fact is you can apply them for minutes. The problem with cryogens and air cooling systems is that they are applied for relatively short times, and my computer modeling shows that they just don't cool as efficiently or as deeply as the ice packs. It's all to do with the temperature and time, not just temperature alone. But then there are always going to be cases where the skin tone is just too dark to be able to cool it properly. For this kind of skin tone, which is very, very dark here, you would need to lower the temperature to below 0 degrees Celsius to be able to mitigate any potential problems with thermal energy. So the problem is it's quite difficult to know just exactly what that limit is. I'm not quite sure how we could calculate that, to be honest. The other thing we can do is select the appropriate wavelength. So we know that if we were to fire, for example, the Nd:YAG wavelength at 1064 nanometers, then at skin, then the absorption is quite low. It's only, as we can see from this table, it's only about 50 inverse centimeters. So that's quite low. So that means that you'll get a lower absorption in the epidermal melanin, and therefore lower temperatures in that region. So it's a bit safer for the very, very darkest skin tones. Whereas Alexandrite lasers has a very high, relatively speaking, absorption, and therefore it's much more likely to cause damage in darker skins. We can see here it's about 164 inverse centimeters, which is more than 3 times that of the Nd:YAG. So you can really only use the Alexandrite on lighter skin tones if you want to be safe. We can see here, these are the absorption curves, melanin absorption curves over different skin tones. And you can see the Alexandrite laser here has a very high absorption rate in the dark skin tones. The IPLs and diodes are lower, and then the Nd:YAG is the lowest out there on the right hand side. So I would recommend, if you have skin tones like these here, then the Alexandrite is best for these kind of skin colors. The IPLs and diodes we could use on these skin tones, but the Nd:YAG is the only one that can be used on all skin tones, including the darkest, because it will cause the least amount of potential damage. So in summary, the skin tone is just essentially the concentration of melanin in the epidermis. If there's more melanin, it will absorb or steal more light, which will lead to higher temperatures in the epidermis. Therefore, we need to mitigate this by cooling the skin surface, like I say, using either ice packs, air cooling, or cryogens. But ice packs is definitely the most efficient in terms of cooling. And then we use longer cooling times for the darker skin tones, but again, choose the most appropriate wavelength according to the skin tone too. Now, you can still, obviously, with using an Nd:YAG laser, we can still use cooling, skin surface cooling as well. Like I said before, the technology determines the temperature rise. The cooling determines how we can mitigate against any unwanted temperatures in the epidermis where we don't want it. Thanks for watching this. I will be making a couple more of these little videos, one to talk about the efficiencies of skin cooling in particular, because there seems to be some confusion out there over that. So thanks for watching, and you can always have a look at my blog for more information. Thank you. Bye.